Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hanlon, and I'd like to introduce our regular correspondent, Alex Mustard. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Adam.
How you
My
doing?
neck is still at a jaunty angle.
Yes, you look sore. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's not too bad, actually.
Good. One of the questions that frequently crops up in the forum is about getting, as people improve, they get better, and obviously taking better images, they then want to start sharing those images and possibly even starting to publish them in publications. So Alex had a lot of material published over the years, so I thought I'd ask him a simple question. How do you get your work published?
Yeah, no, I can completely understand the sentiment. I think a lot of us sort of get into diving, and particularly when we're starting out, we're voracious readers of the diving magazines.
Yep.
You know, particular titles can become really important to us
Yep.
in those formative years.
Yep.
And I think it's natural that we want to maybe then a few years down the line see our own work in those very, very, very magazines, those very pages that drew us into this in the first place.
Yep.
I think there's definitely the fame and fortune allure as well. I have to say, though, the fortune side is not likely to be very, very important. And the fame also means that you're not really famous except amongst a group of another 20 geeky people. But it is, it can be valuable. It definitely can open doors for you. It can definitely open travel opportunities if you're regularly published.
Yep.
I think it's one of the best ways into getting the opportunity to travel places, to do future articles and things. There's particularly when you've got a regular publication record with the magazine. I think there's a lot of places that will host you and allow you to do these sorts of things.
Yep.
And there's no doubt that there is few thrills better as a photographer than walking into your local magazine selling shop and seeing your own picture there amongst all these magazines that you've been seeing for years and years.
Yep.
And I think that's a thrill that, whenever I have a picture on the cover of a magazine, it remains a thrill to these days.
Yep.
But whether it's on the cover or inside, it's really thrilling seeing your work.
Exciting, isn't it? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and we get excited about getting 10s, 20s, hundreds of likes of our pictures online. Big magazines and particularly big newspapers, they go out to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people.
And globally,
it's a whole different scale of exposure for your images.
Yep.
Then social media, okay, we get the immediacy of it, but actually going into proper media gets this huge reach for your images.
Yep.
And particularly if you write or photograph about things you really care about, it can be really fulfilling on multiple levels, getting your pictures published. So
Yep.
it is a really great thing.
Yep.
I think the avenues for a photographer, an underwater photographer, to get their pictures published are many. The obvious sort of magazines that use underwater pictures a lot are obviously scuba diving magazines or free diving magazines.
Yep.
Photography magazines will typically run underwater pictures fairly regularly as a kind of look what these weirdos do type feature.
Yeah.
Wildlife and nature magazines run lots of marine content.
Yep.
And they're a very good opportunity for publishing articles. And then travel magazines sometimes using underwater, more lifestyle-y underwater type pictures. And newspapers as well tend to use sort of eye-catching story type pictures as well.
Yep.
So there's lots of immediately obvious avenues, and then plenty more as well.
Yep.
I think today I was going to sort of just really focus on the most obvious route, which is getting your pictures into a scuba diving magazine, which I think is something that most of us can relate to. We kind of understand the genre.
Yep.
And there's a few things I would say. I think the first things of very good news is, first of all, there is that the door of all the scuba magazines around the world is always open.
It is, yeah.
I think every editor, every publisher I know who's working in those titles is very keen to find the up-and-coming talent.
Yep.
And the door is always open for that up-and-coming talent.
Yeah.
So, if you've got really incredible stuff, you're going to find, an open door to get it through. There is a real desire for that.
Yeah.
However, I think the big mistake I see a lot of photographers making is they look at the diving magazines. They say, oh, my pictures are as good as these. My pictures should be in the magazine. And that's the wrong way to think about it. If your pictures are as good as the ones in the magazine editor will never publish your pictures because they've already got someone who can do those pictures for them. And that's someone that they trust and they can rely on.
Someone they've worked with. Yeah.
Yeah, because they've got a good relationship with them.
Yeah.
But also they trust them to deliver those pictures and the words, if it's words as well, to a publishable quality and on time.
Yeah.
And those two are the things that let down most new contributors. Is every editor I know has got a story almost every month. Oh, we saw this amazing photographer's work on Instagram. We asked them to send their high-res files, and they were unprintable.
Yeah.
Because they were tweaked up and looked great on a phone screen that big, but they were cropped or they were processed to such a point that just the noise when you tried to print them, it just became a mess.
Yeah.
And I think for that perspective, it's it's important to be ready when that opportunity comes. So although the door is always open, make sure you strike at the right time. You only have one chance to make that good first impression. So don't rush into it, but at the same time, don't put it off forever and ever and ever. There's lots of magazines out there, so if you burn bridges with one, you will have another opportunity. And you'll learn a lot from that process. So the key factor is to be better or to be different from what they've already got. And if you can manage that, you've got a really good chance of getting published. If you can be better and different, then they'll almost certainly be biting your arm off to get your work into the magazines.
And I think
one thing I should say on the fame or fortune front is there are lots of scuba magazines around the world, but relatively few that pay money and pay reliably for your pictures. And I'm not going to sort of name names around now, but you pretty quickly work out which are the photographers who give their pictures away and which are the photographers who want to get paid for their pictures. And the magazines where you see the work of the photographers who get paid are the ones that are going to get paid. And some magazines pay very little money, but they pay reliably, and they still get good photographers wanting to contribute, because I'd rather have a small bit of money very reliably paid than the promise of lots of money that never turns up. But obviously, all the keen photographers are competing to be in the titles that pay well and pay reliably.
And I think I pitched to a magazine last year, and they returned with the fact that they pay £30 a page, including images. And I have to say, my own gut feeling on that was that it's just simply not worth the time and effort to do it. So you need to balance that out as well. Fame and fortune is great, and or fame, possibly not fortune. But bear in mind that if you're going to invest a significant amount of time on it, you want to make sure that you're approaching the magazines that are actually going to pay you commensurate with that time that you've put into it. And I'll be honest, at £30 a page, it's not. I wasn't going to do it, so I didn't do it. So,
well, and what a lot of magazines around have discovered is that actually there's photographers out there who will very happily see very good pictures published for free again and again and again. Because they like that for their standing, for their ego, for their
which is fine.
But it may also serve them in other ways. One thing I would say, though, in terms of getting paid, that I think is really good, is if a magazine has really, really low rates, think about how else they could pay you. For example, do you want to sell prints? Do you have some, do you want to sell trips? Say, well, okay, rather than paying me this pittance, how about you give me a half-page advert or a full-page advert promoting my stuff? And you might find that actually you could get a lot of value instead of money. But I didn't really want to get into that side of things today. I sort of wanted to go through that process of how you sort of approach a magazine for the first time. So the first thing to remember is that editor's email address is always inside the cover of the magazine. I would always encourage you to get a copy of whatever magazine you want to publish in, read it, understand the style of their articles, get a feel for the magazine. Each magazine is trying to carve its own niche. Although there's lots of scuba diving magazines around the world, they're all trying to be different. They're not trying to be the same. They're all trying to do it their way. And as a result, an article written for one doesn't necessarily fit to another one. The general theme of the article does, but it often needs to be rewritten in certain ways to fit, maybe slightly different pictures chosen, etc., to work in different markets, because all those magazines are trying to be different. So understand the title you're trying to deal with, and then think about what story you have to tell that will give them something that's better
unique
or different from what they've got at the moment. And then what I would tend to do at that point is I would then maybe make some good notes about my article, pull my favorite pictures together, so I'm really ready to write. But before I do write, I would then contact the editor. I would send a relatively short email to the editor, attach 3 to 5 really stunning pictures at low res to get their attention. You don't want the email to take loads of time to open. You just want some stunning shots to hook them in. and a very brief one paragraph, précis of what the article's about. For example, I just, say been to Lembe with you or something, Adam, and I'm just back from Lembe. I know you must have done loads of articles on Lembe before, but it's also a place we want to read about. We had this amazing experience, right? So I'm going to do you an article on Lembe and talk about, say, these 3 amazing things that I encountered there. But also, I want to tell you about why this particular resort was the standout for me, and maybe a little bit about why it was easy or difficult to get there, or something like that. To think about what you're going to cover so they feel that, I can see the meat of this article. Usually, if the editor's keen, they'll come back to you and say, that's really great, but what we really like in our magazine is, say, a really good focus on the marine life, or we want a really good focus on the diving experience, or, we want to put the reader as if they were on the trip with you. We don't want just to hear about you bragging about how many species. So they'll give you really good advice. And the most important thing you can do is listen to the editor, because they're not telling you how to write a magazine article. They're telling you how to write an article for their magazine. And they're the one who's going to tell you what to write. They will at that point tell you how many words to write and usually how many pictures to send in. Pay really good attention to those numbers. If you write more words than they ask for, you're not giving them more for nothing. You're actually making them more work because they've already decided how much space to give your article. And they can't fit more words on the page. So they have to edit your article down. So if they give you 1,000 words, 1,500 words, 2,000 words, write to that number. That makes their life nice and easy.
The idea is you need to do the edit, not them.
And make sure it doesn't need. You don't need to be Hemingway and write amazing prose, but you do need to write something that a fellow enthusiast would enjoy reading. Think about one of your dive buddies and think about how you would explain that destination, that experience to them down the pub. In a way that would engage them with the subject and get them going on it. I think a few things that I think are good sort of insider tips that I would include is as a photographer. So go back to the picture side of things. It's really important to send in a publishable set of pictures. So say you've just been on a shark trip. Chances are all your pictures are going to be wide angle, blue water backgrounds of sharks, probably all horizontal. A magazine can't run a feature with all the shots being the same. They typically will need about half and half horizontals and verticals to look interesting on a page, whether it's an electronic page or a printed page. They need both those formats to look visually interesting. They also don't want everything shot with the same lens. So, even if they're not your best shots, maybe if you've got a shot with another photographer in the background or another diver in the background, that can actually work really well in the magazine. If you've got pictures that have got good visual variety, particularly in that shark example where all the pictures are going to be quite samey.
Of sharks,
anything that's different, maybe crop a couple tighter or something like that. Give them some variety.
Or some surface shots.
Shoot in a certain way. For example, in Lembe, whenever I get the chance, I'll shoot a bit of wide angle of a critter with the dive guide in the background or something, just to give me some diver shots from Lembe. Because everyone goes and gets amazing macro from there. But to illustrate that Lembe article, you want that variation. I think the other thing that can help is a lot of magazines will run pictures as a double page spread. What have I got around it? This magazine here, for example, this is a kids nature magazine called Ranger Rick Jr. from the States. And if the bigger, so magazines pay you by the space you fill. And the more space you can fill in the magazine, the more money you'll get for the same article. So if you have good pictures that can be used with text around them, like this example here, for example, you will get paid much more money for that same picture being printed across 2 pages than you would for it being used in a small box on 1 page. So if you've got pictures with a little bit of space around the subject where text and titles can be dropped in, then maybe your 4-page feature will suddenly be a 6 or an 8-page feature. And if you're being paid on a page rate, you'll get more money for your work. So having good pictures, but having usable pictures can really increase your income for doing the same bit of work. So that can really help. Most magazines have standard page rates, as Adam was saying earlier. If you have something really special, or you think that you are something really special, well, most photographers think that. But, if you think you have something really special, you could say this is a really unique story. I would like a slightly higher page rate. But I have to say that generally these days it's a buyer's market from the magazine's side.
It would have to be something very special.
Hard haggling. They'll go, nice try, no chance. But if you've got work that you feel is a cut above what they normally have, you might be able to get a slightly higher page rate. But what they might just turn around to do is then actually give you less pages.
Yeah.
Swings
and roundabouts.
And that may not be what you want. You may want more exposure for your work. And then the other thing that I think really can help your income is to always make sure in that image selection that you're giving them is to give something that could be a potential cover shot for the magazine. Have a look at the type of picture they use on the cover. Yep. Some magazines always want a scuba diver on the cover. Others want really graphic macro shots on the cover. It varies hugely around the world. So look at what that magazine typically uses and give them something that's not a copy of what they've had before, but it's in the style of what they normally run. And provide that shot, because a cover shot is the best paid picture in the magazine. And if you can get that shot as well, it increases your income from the article and is the best thing when you walk into the shop as well afterwards. Yeah. So those little things you can do. Finally, though, do make sure that you do make sure that you edit both your image selection and your text very tightly. Yeah. If you give them 40 images and they're only going to need 10, they'll choose the 10 you like the least. So give them 12, 14 pictures that give them the variety of horizontals and verticals. If they need more, they can always ask you for more. Yep. But that way you have, as a photographer, more control as to what goes on the page. Yep. And I think that will make you happier with your pictures. Yep. Also be aware that magazine printing is not the same as inkjet printing, and your pictures generally won't look as amazing as you're used to seeing them printed. So prepare yourself for that. But no one else will know quite how nice your pictures could look if they were printed on photographic paper or on a screen, and everyone else will think they look fantastic. So don't get too hung up about poor printing. I think that can really work. Yeah. And then if you take nothing else away from this chat today, is finally ultimate respect to the magazine's deadlines. Yes. Magazines need to fill pages by a certain date when the magazine goes to the printer. Yeah. And the best way that you can build a good relationship with a magazine is to be Mr. or Mrs. Punctual, Mr. or Mrs. Reliable, because the magazine will take a reliable contributor over a talented one every day. Yep. What they want is talented and reliable, but they'll take reliable over talented every single day of the week. Yep. So I always, get a deadline. If they don't give you one, ask for one, and make sure that you beat that deadline by a day or two. Yep. They'll probably fall off their chair with shock that a contributor has beaten the deadline. But actually, if you prove that you're reliable, they'll come back to you again and again, and you'll begin to build that relationship. And as in any business, a good relationship with your customer, with your clients, is absolutely critical for it to last long term. Yep. So I think that's a good place to stop that discussion today. Yeah, quite agree. But respect that deadline.
I think it's really, really important that it's about building relationships, and the more you can do to build a relationship, the more future work you'll get. It's anyone can get published once. The trick is to be published repeatedly. So thank you very much, Alex. That was very illuminating. I would like to thank our sponsor, which was Critis at Lembe, of today's episode. Please feel free to add suggestions for any future topics in the comments box below. Like the video if you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, and all the very best.